My daughter-in-law didn't know I was home. She thought she had time. She thought I wouldn't notice. She was wrong. I stepped into my shop quietly that afternoon, earlier than usual. The place felt the same warm wood, ticking clocks, the smell of oil and metal, but something was off. Not loud, not obvious, just wrong. Gloria looked at me the moment I walked in. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Your daughter-in-law stopped by, she said after a pause. Went to the back. That was all I needed. Courtney never came here without Daniel. Never alone. Never to the back. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I just nodded and walked past the counter. Because when something feels wrong, the worst thing you can do is move too fast. You observe, you confirm, and then you decide. That was the moment everything started. Not when she touched my files. Not when she started asking questions. But when I realized she thought I wasn't paying attention. Before we go further, if you were in my position, would you confront her immediately or stay quiet? Comment yes or no. Because what I did next wasn't what most people would expect. I didn't go to the back immediately. That's what she would expect. Instead, I stayed at the counter for a minute, picked up a tool, checked a clock I had already fixed earlier that morning. Routine matters, because the moment you break routine, people notice. Then I walked to the back. Slow, normal, like I had nothing on my mind. The workspace looked untouched at first glance. That's the thing about people who think they're careful. They rely on appearances. I don't. I've spent 40 years working with mechanisms where a shift of less than a millimeter can throw everything off. So I looked closer. The second drawer. It was closed, but not completely. Half a centimeter off alignment. Most people would never see it. I did. I opened it. Files were there. Same folders, same order. Almost. One file, insurance documents, was angled slightly. Not enough to scream. Just enough to whisper. And whispers are where truth lives. I didn't touch anything else. Didn't fix it. Didn't reset it. I left it exactly the way it was. Because this wasn't about cleaning up. This was about confirming a pattern. When I walked back out, Gloria looked at me. Well, she asked. I shook my head once. Nothing yet. But we both knew that wasn't true. If you notice something like this, would you ignore it or start digging deeper? Comment dig or ignore. Because from that moment on, I started paying attention to everything. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid. Because I was thinking. There's a difference. Fear makes you react. Thinking makes you prepare. I replayed the day in my head, not just what I saw, but what it meant. Courtney wasn't careless. She was precise. And people like that don't act without a reason. The question wasn't what she did. The question was why. The next morning, Daniel called. Normal voice, normal tone. Hey, Dad. Courtney said she stopped by yesterday. Hope that was okay. There it was. Casual. Too casual. It was fine, I said. What did she need? Pause. Just looking around. She's been curious about the shop. Curious. That word again. I've heard curiosity before. This wasn't it. Real curiosity asks questions. It doesn't open drawers when no one's watching. But I didn't push. Didn't challenge him. Because this wasn't about proving him wrong. This was about understanding how far this went. Tell her she's welcome anytime, I said. And I meant it. Because the more comfortable she felt, the more she would show me. And that's exactly what I needed. Have you ever trusted someone, only to realize later something felt off? Comment. I felt that. Because this was just the beginning. For a long time, it was just me and Daniel. After his mother passed, the shop became our routine. Sundays, coffee, small talk that didn't need to be important. That's how relationships stay strong, not in big moments, but in quiet consistency. Then Courtney came into the picture. At first, I liked her. Everyone did. She was sharp, confident, knew how to carry herself. The kind of person who walks into a room and makes you feel like everything is under control. That's a skill. And like any skill, it can be used in more than one way. Their wedding was simple. No drama, no tension. If there were signs back then, I didn't see them. Or maybe I didn't want to. Because when your son is happy, you don't go looking for problems. You trust. You support. You step back. That's what I did. And maybe that's where it started. Not with her actions, but with my assumption that everything was fine. Be honest, do you trust your instincts immediately, or do you give people the benefit of the doubt first? Because I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and that gave her time. The questions didn't come all at once. They never do. They came slowly, carefully, almost professionally. How long have you owned the shop? Have you ever thought about retiring? Is this area valuable now? Normal question. On the surface. But questions are never just questions. They point somewhere, and hers always pointed in the same direction. Value, ownership, timing. One night at dinner, she asked, "What happens to the shop, eventually?" Daniel didn't react. He shouldn't. To him, it sounded like planning. To me, it sounded like positioning. "I'll figure it out," I said. She smiled. "Of course, I just think it's important to plan ahead." Important. Responsible. Logical. That's how it sounds. But when every question leads to the same place, it's no longer curiosity. It's strategy. I didn't shut her down. Didn't even slow her down. Because the more she spoke, the clearer her direction became. When someone asks too many innocent questions, do you get suspicious? Because I didn't stop her. I let her keep talking. It wasn't sudden. That's what made it dangerous. Daniel didn't wake up different. He shifted, slowly, subtly. He stopped coming by as often. Then he started checking his phone more when he did. Then the conversations changed. "Maybe you should take it easy, Dad. You've done enough. You don't have to carry everything forever." Sounds like concern. But real concern doesn't redirect your life. It supports it. There's a difference. And I could hear it. Not in his words, but in where those words came from. Because they weren't his. Not entirely. They were influenced, guided, planted. And that's when I stopped thinking of this as coincidence and started seeing it as something else. Something intentional. If someone slowly changed the way your family member thinks, would you notice? Because I did, and I didn't say a word. Distance doesn't always look like absence. Sometimes it looks like shorter visits, delayed replies, a smile that arrives half a second too late. Daniel was still my son. He still cared, but something had started standing between us, and it had a name. Courtney. She never told him to cut me off. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she used softer words. Boundaries, future, independence, planning. Words that sound healthy, until you realize they're being used like tools. One Sunday, Daniel said, "Courtney thinks we need to build our own life." I looked at him. "You don't already have one?" He didn't answer. That silence told me more than any confession could. Because he wasn't choosing against me. He was being guided away from me. That was worse. If he hated me, I could fight that. But confusion? Confusion is harder. Confusion makes people believe the wrong idea was their own. So I made a decision. I would not argue with him. I would not force him to choose. I would let the truth come to him the only way it could. Clearly. And with proof. I bought a small green notebook the next morning. Nothing special. Hardcover. Plain pages. The kind of thing no one notices. Every time Courtney asked a strange question, I wrote it down. Every time Daniel repeated a phrase that didn't sound like him, I wrote it down. Every time she came near the shop without a reason, I wrote that down too. Dates, times, exact words, no emotion, just facts. That notebook became my anchor, because when someone manipulates slowly, they make you doubt your own memory. You start wondering, did she really say that? Did I misunderstand? Am I just being suspicious? Written records stop that. They turn feelings into patterns, and patterns into evidence. I didn't know yet how bad it was, but I knew one thing. Courtney was patient, so I had to be more patient. She was careful, so I had to be cleaner. She was planning for a future where I was no longer standing in her way. So I started planning for the moment she would finally expose herself. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted the truth to survive long enough to be seen. The first person I called was Marcus Webb, former deputy, private investigator now, quiet man, no big promises, no dramatic speeches. That's why I trusted him. He came to the shop after closing and sat across from me at the workbench. I told him everything, the questions, the drawer, Daniel's distance. Courtney's sudden interest in property values and retirement. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked 4 questions. Does she have access to your accounts? No. Has she asked about the will directly? Not yet. Does Daniel know you're concerned? No. Do you have an attorney? Yes. He nodded. Good. Keep it that way. Then he said something I never forgot. People like this don't make one big move. They test doors. When one opens, they walk further. That was exactly what Courtney had been doing. Testing. Watching. Measuring. Marcus started the following week. I didn't ask for miracles. I asked for facts. Because facts don't care how charming someone is. And Courtney had charm to spare. Marcus found the first piece within 2 weeks. Courtney had been meeting someone downtown. Sam Cafe. Same back table. 3 times. The woman's name was Paige Hensley. Commercial real estate attorney. Not family law. Not estate planning for couples. Commercial property. My shop. Marcus showed me photos. Courtney leaning forward. Paige taking notes. No Daniel. That part mattered most. If this was about their future, my son should have been there. But he wasn't. Which meant he wasn't a partner in the plan. He was part of the plan. A tool. A doorway. A signature she hoped to use later. Then Marcus handed me a summary. Fragments from public conversations. Asset. Transfer. Timing. Change in control. The words were cold. Businesslike. But underneath them was something uglier. They were discussing my life's work like it was already halfway out of my hands. That night, I called Robert Ashford, my attorney. We need to tighten everything, I said. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, come in tomorrow. That was when this stopped being suspicion and became preparation. The moment that changed, everything happened by accident. Daniel invited me to a cookout. I arrived early, 40 minutes early. The backyard gate was open, and I could hear him outside near the grill. Then I heard Courtney inside. On the phone. The kitchen window was cracked open. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard my name without hearing my name. He's 64, she said. A pause. Blood pressure medication. Works alone most days. My body went still. Then she said, I'm not being morbid. I'm being realistic. At some point, this becomes a timing decision. Timing? There it was again. Not market timing. Not business timing. My timing. She wasn't waiting for retirement. She was waiting for absence. I walked back to my car and sat there with my hands on the wheel. For the first time, I didn't just feel suspicious. I felt measured. Like my age, my health, my daily routine had become numbers in someone else's plan. I called Marcus. I need proof, I said. You'll get it, he answered. Then I walked into that backyard and smiled like nothing had happened. Because now I understood. Courtney thought she had time. She didn't know I had already started the clock. That night I went back to the shop. No lights. No music. Just ticking. Above my workbench sat Miriam's clock. My wife had placed it there 2 days before she went into the hospital for the last time. She looked weak that day. But her eyes were clear. Arthur, she said, this one stays here. Then she touched the case gently. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. For 8 years, I thought it was grief talking. I was wrong. I lifted the clock down and opened the back panel. The movement was clean. Perfect. Miriam had restored it herself. Then I ran my fingers along the base and felt something shift. A hidden compartment. Inside was a sealed letter. Her handwriting hit me harder than any voice could have. She had noticed Courtney before I did. At the engagement dinner, the questions, the listening, the way she watched more than she spoke. Miriam had written, Arthur, you fix broken things, but some things aren't broken yet. They're just going wrong. Watch for the signs. Protect what we built. I sat there for a long time. Miriam hadn't left me a memory. She had left me a warning. And now I finally understood it. If you're still here, comment clock, because this is where everything turns. After that letter, I stopped doubting myself. Robert tightened the trust. Nothing could be transferred easily. Nothing could be touched without legal friction. Marcus kept watching, and I installed a camera above my workbench. Not for drama, for proof. People like Courtney don't stop when they get close. They get bold. I knew she would come back. And she did. Thursday afternoon. I was away from the shop. Gloria was at the counter. Courtney came in, calm as ever. Said she was picking something up for Daniel. then asked to use the restroom. 14 minutes later, she left. That evening, I watched the footage. She walked straight to the filing cabinet. No hesitation. Second drawer. Insurance file. Phone out. Photos. 1, 2, 3. Then she turned toward the clock. Picked it up. Studied it. Pressed along the base. For 1 second, I thought she might find the compartment. She didn't, because she didn't know what love looks like when it's hidden. She only knew what value looked like. I stopped the video and called Robert. "It's time," I said. He answered calmly. "Then we move." I invited Daniel and Courtney to dinner. Montford rooftop. Private enough to talk. Public enough to stay controlled. Courtney was pleased. She thought this was the conversation she had been waiting for. Estate planning. The shop. The future. She arrived dressed perfectly, smiling like a woman expecting good news. Daniel looked nervous. I brought the clock wrapped in canvas. After dinner, when the plates were cleared, I placed it on the table. Courtney's smile changed. "Not much, but enough." "This was your mother's clock," I told Daniel. "She left something inside." I opened the hidden compartment and placed Miriam's letter on the table. Then I placed Marcus's report beside it. Photos, timeline, attorney meetings, insurance documents, camera stills. Courtney didn't touch the folder. Daniel did. He read slowly, page by page. The longer he read, the quieter he became. Courtney finally said, "Arthur, this is out of context." I looked at her, then explained the context. She opened her mouth. Nothing came. Daniel looked at her and said one word. "Don't." That was the moment she lost. Not because I exposed her. Because he finally saw her. Courtney left without another speech. The restaurant door closed softly behind her. Daniel and I stayed at the table. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "How long did you know?" 18 months, I said. His face changed. Not anger. Grief. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I needed you to see it," I said. "Not hear it from me." He looked down at the papers. Then at the clock. "Mom knew?" "She suspected," I said. "And she prepared." A month later, Daniel filed for divorce. No scene. No battle. Just an ending. He started coming back on Sundays. Coffee, pastries, quiet mornings in the shop. One day I handed him a watch movement and taught him how to clean it. He was too fast at first. Then slower, more patient, more himself. That's how healing starts. Not with speeches. With rhythm. The clock is still above my workbench. I wind it every Sunday before Daniel arrives. And every time it ticks, I remember. Greed doesn't always arrive as greed. Sometimes it arrives as concern. Planning. Good advice. So pay attention. Protect what matters. And never confuse silence with weakness. If this story meant something to you, comment, respect. And if you know someone who needs this warning, share it with them.